Welcome back to Latin. We're ready for Wheelock chapter 30 and finishing off the subjunctive mood, which is nice. So let's learn the present and, the perfect and pluperfect forms of the subjunctive. They're rather easy to form. They're just no new sets of endings, just new combinations. So the perfect subjunctive active is the perfect stem plus the imperfect subjunctive forms of the verb to be. So eram, eris, erit, and so forth. So you have the perfect stem. So here for the verb amo, that's amo. So the forms of amo, amo, amare, amawi, amatum. So the perfect stem is right there. Take our perfect stem. And then we add eram, eris, erit. So amawarim, amawaris, and so forth. So the whole conjugation, we're looking over here at the perfect active subjunctive. So here, this is a fourth declension word from audio. So we get audiverim, audiveris, audiverit, audiverimus, audiveretus, audiverent. So, and in the first conjugation again, amawarim, amawaris, etc., perfect stem plus those imperfect subjunctive, plus the imperfect subjunctive forms of the verb to be. Second declension, again, take the perfect stem, because it's moneo, monera, monoi. So I take my perfect stem. I drop off the E, the last letter I, the E sound, and I use the stem, and then I put those endings on. Third conjugation, duxi is the third principal part of duco. So it's duco, ducera, duxi, ductum. And third, I stem, incaperum. So again, the set of endings it's a set of endings you already know. It's the imperfect subjunctive of the verb to be. And you're simply adding those forms to the perfect stem of whatever verb you're looking for. That's the perfect active subjunctive. The perfect subjunctive passive is going to be the perfect passive participle plus the present forms of the subjunctive of to be. So sim, sis, sit, simus, etc. So amatus is my perfect passive participle, amatus sim. So we should translate these. So the active, I may have been, I should have been, I would have been, this, I would have been, I should have been, and so forth. So again, in the full conjugation, we come down here to the perfect passive subjunctive. It is the perfect passive participle plus the present subjunctive forms of the verb to be. Sim, sis, sit, simus, sit, sint. Same for all the different conjugations. Same pattern. Perfect passive participle plus the present subjunctive active forms of the verb to be. Moving on to the pluperfect tense. The pluperfect subjunctive active is the perfect infinitive plus the personal endings. Mst, must, tis, unt. So it's formed just like the imperfect, except the imperfect subjunctive starts with the present infinitive plus the endings. Here, since we're in the pluperfect, we're going to start with a perfect infinitive plus the endings. So we get amawissum, amawisses, etc. So again, we'll look at that. So here's the pluperfect subjunctive active. Monowissum, monowisses, monowisset, monowissemus, monowissetus, monowissent. Or in the first conjugation, amawissum, amawisses, amawisset, amawissemus, amawissetus, amawissent. And then what about the pluperfect subjunctive passive? Well, just as you might expect, it's just the perfect passive participle plus the imperfect subjunctive of the verb to be. So here, looking at all those together, I'll make that a little smaller so we can look at them all together, maybe not that small. So we're dealing here with these forms on the right side today, the perfect and pluperfect active and the perfect and pluperfect passive subjunctive. Obviously, you'll need to make flashcards of all these. But again, the forms are not surprising. There are no new endings. Again, it's just a different combination of endings. So I already know eram, eris, erit, remus, eritus, erant. Now I just need to know that when I pop that onto the perfect stem, I get the perfect subjunctive. Likewise, I already know amatos, and I already know the present subjunctive active of the verb to be. I already know sim, sis, sit, sima, sit, sint. I just now need to know that when I put them together, I get the perfect passive subjunctive. So obviously need to make flashcards of all those forms so that you feel comfortable with them. And then what are we going to do with these things? Another thing to do with the subjunctive is an indirect question. We already learned indirect discourse. Indirect discourse uses an accusative for the subject with the infinitive for the verb. When it comes to indirect questions, we use the subjunctive instead. So here's our original sentence. Here's the original question. Quid Gaius facit? What did Gaius do? Or what is Gaius doing? And then in my indirect question, rogant quid Gaius faciat, they are asking, what is Gaius doing? So in the indirect question gets the subjunctive after the verb of asking. And again, you can read much more about that on page 247, but it's, again, very straightforward. Indirect questions take the subjunctive after the verb of asking. Sequence of tenses. Whenever you use the subjunctive mood, it's almost always going to be in a dependent clause. And how are you going to know which tense to use? We do the same thing in English. Yesterday, I asked him what the weather is. So I asked past tense because I was talking about yesterday. Yesterday, I asked him what was the weather. So I use was because I use the word asked, which is a past tense. So we need a past tense to follow a past tense. Latin has their own way of doing it. It's a little different. They use this sequence of tenses, and here are the rules. And this is on page 248. If the main verb is a present or a future tense, then the subordinate subjunctive that follows must be a primary tense. And the primary tenses are the present for action at the same time of the verb or action after the main verb, and the perfect tense for action before the main verb. We're going to look at examples of these, but again, we just want to get the rules first. If the main verb is in the past tense, though, then the subordinate subjunctive that follows needs to be a historic tense. That's either going to be the imperfect for action at the same time as the main verb, or pluperfect for action before the main verb. So here are our examples. So here are primary tenses. Id facit, id faciet. This is present. He does this thing. He does it. Or faciet. He will do it. And then I have a purpose clause. Ut, in order that, and we know that after ut comes the subjunctive, in order that he may help me. And that's the old way to keep these straight in English. He does this that he may help me for the primary tenses. And he did this, so this is past tense, perfect tense. He did this, or in the imperfect, he was doing this. Ut me juvaret, so this is the imperfect subjunctive. Easily identified because it's the infinitive plus the ending. He did this that he might help me. So this is good old English, how you would be taught to do this. That he may help me was how you translate the primary tenses. That he might help me is how you translate the secondary tenses or the historical tenses. Wheelock suggests just that you do them both. He does this to help me, that you change it into an infinitive, which we can also do in English. I like to keep the that and he may help me simply because it keeps it straight that you're using a subjunctive, a finite verb. Some more of the examples. Tam duris est ut eam vitam. So this is kind of a result clause. He was so harsh, and this is was because it's the past tense. It's a perfect passive. He was so harsh. Excuse me, is, sorry, it's an adjective, not a verb form. He is so harsh that I avoid him. And this is present. So I've got a present tense in the main verb. So my dependent clause also gets a primary tense, a present tense. But I have he was so harsh. Fuit or erat. Fuit is perfect. Erat is imperfect. He was so harsh, past tense, that I avoided him. So the imperfect gives you the secondary tense at the same time of the verb. And then many more examples. Rogant or rogabunt, they are asking or they will ask. And then, so I'm going to use primary tenses, either the future or the perfect or the future perfect periphrastic or future periphrastic using a present tense of the verb to be. So they are asking, what is he doing? Or they are asking what he did, or they are asking what he will do, what he is about to do. Okay? And then in the secondary tenses, if I start with a past tense, rogawarant or rogabant, they asked or they were asking. Then I'm going to ask, they were asking, what was he doing? Imperfect. They were asking, what had he done? Right? That's the pluperfect that we just learned. The pluperfect subjunctive active. The perfect stem plus arum, eris, erit, eremus, eritus, erant. Or they asked what he was about to do. So you should be familiar with this rule. So this rule might show up on a quiz. And for the rest of it, you simply need to be able to recognize it in translation and translate it appropriately. We're not doing a lot of composition in this class, but you should be familiar with the rule. Okay, for the rest of this chapter, so you should make a flashcard of the sequence of tenses. Wouldn't hurt to make a flashcard about how the indirect questions work. Of course, you need to make flashcards for these forms, that we looked at here, for how you make the perfect and pluperfect subjunctive in both the active and passive voices. And then you need to make flashcards of all the vocabulary in lesson 30. So once you have those done and you've had a day or so to study them, then I'd like you to work on these translations, numbers 1 and 3, on page 250. Once you have those roughed out yourself according to our usual plan, find the verb, parse it, and so forth, then watch the other video for the translations, for the responses to that, and then prepare yourself for the quiz.